Welcome to the Real News Network. As the economic crisis deepens, many economists have pointed to low wages, lack of real purchasing power as one of the root causes of the current economic crisis. Consumer debt, the result thereof. So why are wages so low in the United States? Well, clearly it's partly connected, at least, to the lack of unionization. The United States is one of the least unionized countries in the industrialized world, certainly the least number of workers covered by a union contract. To try to understand why, we're joined now by Elaine Bernard. She's the head of the trade union program at the Harvard Law School. Thanks, Elaine. So if I get my numbers right, we're about 7.5% of the private sector are unionized, maybe 11% in the public sector. So why are the numbers so low?
The U.S. has been seen the decline of unions really since as a density, that is the proportion of the workforce that is in unions, since 1955. But in absolute numbers, the number of folks in unions since about 1981. And most of the story is a decline in the private sector. What we've seen is, in fact, if we go back to 1973, maybe 1 in 4 Americans who were working, whether a public sector worker or a private sector worker, was in a union. Today, 1 in 13 in the private sector is in a union, whereas 1 in 3 is in a union in the public sector. So we've seen, in fact, the growth of unions in the public sector to a point where, today it's 36.8, 37% of the workforce, and huge decline in the private sector.
So in the private sector, the numbers have gone from 15 million down to 8.2 million, whereas the public sector has gone from 3 up to 7.8. So talk about some of the reasons for this.
One of the key reasons given, of course, is the law is very different. Most people don't realize that private sector employees are under one national law that goes back to 1935, the National Labor Relations Act. And that law has changed mostly not through legislation, but actually through very undemocratic decisions made by judges who know modestly nothing about the workplace.
For example?
It's written into the labor law that, and internationally, that workers have a right to strike. Right to strike is pretty fundamental. In U.S. labor, private sector law, you have the right to strike. But the judges have looked at that and said, you have the right to strike, and we can't take that away, but we've decided that you can be permanently replaced. Now, I teach international labor relations, and I go to other countries, and you try to explain to a normal person in another country that, well, you've got the right to strike, which means in every country that you can't be fired for going on strike. But in the U.S., you can be permanently replaced. So you're not fired, you just lost your job permanently.
Permanent replaced means we can hire scabs, keep them, and you can stay out as long as you like.
What normally happens is if you then decide, gee, we've lost this strike, I'm going back to work. I admit, I give up, I yield, I'm coming back to work. Normally, that means that the temporary replacement worker needs to lose their job because they're temporary. And the worker who went on strike and therefore didn't lose their job, just left their job for a short while to engage in legal strike activity, they are returned to their job. In the United States, this striker replacement means that, you've more or less lost your job. It's not there for you anymore.
So unorganized workers, when approached to join unions, I guess would then obviously say, well, what's the point? If going on strike means I'm risking my job completely.
Sure.
So this is a factor for cutting down on unionization.
Yeah, well, I don't think most people don't join unions to go on strike or to engage in anything. They join unions to gain a voice in the workplace, to bargain collectively. And the real problem is, in the United States, it's only the exceptional worker who's going to do that, because employers have made it very clear in this country that they will do anything to prevent workers from unionizing, up to and including illegally firing workers. I mean, in 1 in 4 campaigns in the United States, workers are illegally terminated for attempting to exercise their rights that, allegedly they have since 1935.
Now, there's supposed to be a labor relations board where this is supposed to be redressed. What's the real reality of that?
It takes a long time, and, sometimes, if you've been illegally fired in an organizing drive, it can take at least a couple of years to get your job back, if you get your job back. And by that point, the campaign is, the organizing campaign is totally
How does that compare,
destroyed.
for example, to Canada?
Oh, in Canada, in most jurisdictions, there's expedited hearings. So it's understood that if an employee is fired during an organizing drive, that, the board needs to hear that very quickly and come up with a decision within a week or so. And even if there's, things that need to drag it out, give an interim decision so that it doesn't interfere with the election campaign.
What are some of the other legislative obstacles to organizing?
In America, 50% plus one need to make a decision to form a union. In most European countries, a few workers seeking to have voice in the workplace can bring about the creation of a works council, can join a union, can have collective voice. The 50% plus one is a unique aspect to North American labor law. Our law is very complicated. It really goes back to the 1930s and needs to be understood in those terms. A lot of workers were in concentrated workplaces, the big manufacturing industries, and the idea was that, a union would organize workers by standing outside, handing out leaflets. So things like access to the workforce is greatly restricted by the courts today, so that it's very difficult for a union to speak to workers. Can't go on company property, it's private property. Can't find out who works there, don't have access to the employee list to be able to meet with workers, to engage in a discussion. So our laws become a huge barrier to workers being able to express their desire to form a collective organization.
Well, in the next segment of our interview, let's look at the picture of unionization in the United States and drill further into why it's so low. Sure. Please join us for the next segment of this interview on the Real News Network. There are times when reality just asserts itself. In spite of the haze created by television news and entertainment, sometimes crisis rips a tear in the fabric of myth and propaganda. Now a profound economic crisis has ripped asunder the American dream itself. Millions of people losing jobs and homes. They lack proper health care and any real sense of security. Since 2001, workers' wages have fallen or remained stagnant, even though worker productivity has risen almost 33%. By 2006, the top 1% of households were receiving 23% of all pre-tax income, more than double what it was in the 1970s. It's the greatest concentration of income since 1928. As unemployment rises, we need to know why this crisis is happening and what we can do to defend ourselves. Why are wages so low? Why is the society so laden with debt? Is it in ordinary Americans' interest to have $1 trillion military budget to project power across the globe? Corporate television news won't ask these questions, let alone try to find answers. Only a truly independent news network can tackle these questions with courage and with ordinary people's interests in mind. We need a news network that's independent of corporations, governments, and political parties. We need the real news. But there won't be a real news network unless we raise substantial funds right away. The current financial crisis has hit our funding hard. Together, we do have the power to turn it around. There are already hundreds of thousands of people watching the Real News every month. If everyone pitches in, we can build an internet and cable television network that will change the face of media forever. You can organize house parties, talk to friends at school and at work, send email blasts and spread the word. Distribute this video to everyone you know. Pick up the phone and call a few friends and suggest they visit therealnews.com. Invest just 10 minutes a day to ask friends and colleagues to join the campaign to create a truly independent source of internet and television news. Together, we can build this network. Just 50,000 people at $10 a month gets us to our first level of sustainability. You can help us reach this goal, and when we do, we'll move to television in millions of homes across North America. Help us reach an audience in the millions. Please contribute generously. Spread the word. Let's make the Real News television network a reality.
Your tax-deductible donation makes it possible. Please contribute at therealnews.com.